In last week's episode, we talked about why it might be that Stormtroopers and other mooks in general are terrible at missing their targets. Let's see what you had to say. The first thing we gotta talk about is how Stormtroopers are not all clones, which is a thing that I said. So as far as I understand it, at the point where Han and Leia and Luke are trying to escape the Death Star, those Stormtroopers are mostly conscripts and recruits, humans, and are not part of the former clone army. Just dudes. At that point, the only clones, I think, that are still part of the Stormtrooper ranks are the 501st, which are sort of like Vader's bad boys. And as far as I can tell, you can argue, at least a little bit, that some of those 501st Stormtroopers are on the Death Star at that point, but it's a sort of tenuous argument, and that doesn't change the fact that not all Stormtroopers are clones. So, settled. There's a really great post on the subreddit by Macecurb about some of this, and there's a really great conversation that follows it. And actually, the conversation on the subreddit this week in general was really great, super helpful, really interesting. So yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. As a side note, I've also been saying Palpatine for so long, and no one has corrected me that it's Palpatine, that I'm starting to wonder about the people I hang out with and feel at least a little bit like Homer Simpson. So I'm just gonna call him Emperor Crandall from now on.
Arch teacher is named Krabappel? I've been calling her Crandall.
But seriously, we do have to talk about MrZeroInterviewer's comment that provides dialogue between Tarkin and Darth Vader, as well as between Han and Leia, where Leia says, "Oh, they let us escape," and Han is like, "You think that was an easy, this kid was not easy?" And also RaidenUzumaki's comment that basically states that this shouldn't be a fan theory, but is rather just some piece of the story that people forgot or didn't put together. So one of the things that I find really interesting about Star Wars and talking about it is the layers upon layers of canon. There's the G canon, which is the George Lucas canon, the television canon, the extended universe canon, and they all have a shifting and complicated relationship with one another. And I think some of the most interesting discussions that I saw happen on YouTube and on the subreddit were revolving around trying to figure out which portion of the canon you were referencing in your defense of some idea or of some theory. This is brilliant, I think, from a storytelling perspective, from an economic perspective, and it makes interacting with the canon and discussing it such an undertaking and such an event, but it also can have some side effects, which is that, the guy who hosts a YouTube show ends up not having any clue what he's talking about. This is not a joke. While writing this episode, I actually sent a Slack message to Morgan where I said, "Oh my God, I know so much about Stormtroopers." Whoops. So I mean, in a way, this fan theory video did kind of exactly the thing that we were trying to figure out whether or not the fan theory videos could do, which is inspire a conversation where one of your friends, you're sitting around a table and they say like, all right, I have this thought about Star Wars. And then they lay out the thought, but it's based on some bizarre premise that doesn't make any sense or isn't true. And so someone else gets to say like, I don't know if you, blah, and then the conversation just goes from there. But obviously that falls flat in this situation where I can't respond, accept, and then move the conversation forward, because it's, a video. I'm static. As much as I like to pretend we're having a conversation, it's complicated. This fan theory series is a big experiment in us trying to figure out if there are other kinds of questions that we can ask that are different from the kinds of questions Idea Channel normally asks, and to try to figure out how to ask them in a way that aligns with how Idea Channel works. And we learned a lot of lessons from this episode. Frankly, we were attracted to the idea of doing fan theories because a lot of the research has already been done, and we were excited about being able to bring things to you, to sort of set up all of these ideas next to one another and then open it up for discussion. But I think one of the things that I learned is that it's really easy to get comfortable in the mindset of this research is done and it's right and I just have to present it, and I don't end up interrogating the assumptions that I already have or that other people seem to be operating on. I just take them as, reinforcing, and so present everything at face value, which is boring and also not what Idea Channel does. It's not, it's not our steez. But what's amazing and kind of the best part about all of this is that doesn't stop you guys from having these great and incredible and deep conversations about how all of this canon relates to one another, how all of these ideas work, in light of the fact that we kind of stumbled through the premise and missed how important it is to dig through all of those layers of canon. Or just the one layer of canon that confirms that this is, just a thing people forgot. Or as SeaDawg pointed out on Twitter, double confirmed as canon because it's also referenced in the NPR Star Wars radio play. Anyway, I guess this has been a little bit more of a peek into the Idea Channel process, cross-pollinated with a little bit of a mea culpa instead of a true comment response. So to leave you with one additional thought, Little Toy Boat on the subreddit said that they think of Stormtrooper aim as being a sub-trope of the law of conservation of ninjutsu, which I love, and what this states is that there is only a certain amount of ninjutsu available to each side of a battle, so it gets spread very thin when there is a large number of ninja, whereas one ninja will have the most ninjutsu, and so dozens or hundreds of mooks will just become cannon fodder because their ninjutsu is spread so low. So maybe Stormtrooper aim works the same way. I love it. I am gonna, yes. Of course, if we could do it all again, we might talk about whether or not it's possible to claim that Jar Jar Binks was really a Sith Lord and knowing collaborator of Emperor Crandall the whole time.